Welcome to the Football Film Room Show. I'm Nick Kehoe, and we've got another great episode for you today. We are going to continue our 2026 NFL preview, look at every single team heading into the year, going division by division. Last week, of course, we did the NFC East. This week, going to jump over to the AFC, do the AFC East. And we're going to start with the New England Patriots. Now, the Patriots, as you all know, shocked the football world last season. Had an amazing turnaround under Mike Vrabel in his first year. Went from 4-13 to 14-3. AFC East champions, and of course, AFC Conference champions. Made it all the way to the Super Bowl where they were completely outmatched by the Seahawks, but that's neither here nor there. The fact that they made it to the Super Bowl in Mike Vrabel's first season when they had won 4 games the previous year, obviously very impressive. Now, the interesting thing about the Patriots is that despite the fact that we can all admit, they had a bit of an easy road to the Super Bowl last year, both with their regular season schedule and with what they had to face in the playoffs, the fortuitous circumstances that confronted them each week in January. Despite all that, they're actually a really good football team. I mean, I think that got a little bit lost in all the discussion about their schedule and about who they faced and all the breaks that they caught during the playoffs. They don't have very many weaknesses. Overall, they are a tough football team, a situationally sound football team, good in all 3 phases. Like every team, they have places where you want to attack on both sides of the ball, but nothing is glaring. And that, as much as anything, was the reason for them reaching the Super Bowl last year. But the biggest question entering 2026 is which Patriots offense is the real Patriots offense? Because last year during the regular season, New England was as good as anybody. Possibly the best offense in the league, certainly up there. They were consistent, they were explosive, they were effective in both phases of the game, throwing the ball and running it. But then they got to the playoffs, and as we all know and saw week in, week out, they fell off a cliff. They were somewhat of a shell of themselves, you could say. Just listen to these numbers. They scored 29 points per game during the regular season, and that dropped to just 15 during the playoffs. They went from averaging 250 passing yards per game during the regular season to just 174 in the postseason. They seemingly could only run the ball in the playoffs when Drake May scrambled, with their running backs averaging just 3.3 yards per carry during the postseason after being the number 6 rushing attack in the NFL. And their protection, which was probably just middle of the pack during the regular season, they were awful in the playoffs. Wasn't all of them. There was a little bit of Drake May holding onto the ball as well, but they allowed 21 sacks in 4 games, which is not what you want. And most importantly, within the offense, Drake May's performance dropped off completely. I mean, he was runner-up for the MVP during the regular season, completed 72% of his passes. And we're not talking about a guy who's just dinking and dunking during the season. He was throwing the ball downfield, averaged 8.9 yards per attempt, and still completed 72% of his passes. Really impressive year 2 from Drake May. Don't want to take that away from him. Had a 113.5 passer rating, led the NFL. Then he got to the playoffs and he completed just 58% of his passes for just 6.9 yards per attempt and had just an 82.2 passer rating. He turned the ball over just 11 times in 17 regular season games. In 4 playoff games, he gave it away 8 times. So again, blame it on whatever you want to. Blame it on the offensive line, bad weather. To me, one of the biggest issues was the level of competition. And you're probably saying, okay, yeah, obviously in the playoffs you're going to be facing tougher teams, but the best offenses still play relatively well versus the really good defenses, if they are indeed the best offenses. And that's kind of the question with the Patriots, because during the regular season last year, they didn't face one top 10 scoring defense. Not one. Once they got to the playoffs, they faced nothing but top 10 scoring defenses. The Chargers were number 9, I believe, and then the Texans, Seahawks, and Broncos were all top 3. So they played much tougher competition, better scheme, teams with better pass rushes, and it wasn't as easy as it was in the regular season. I don't think they are as bad of an offense as they were in the playoffs. I also don't think they were as good as they were in the regular season. They're somewhere in the middle, probably more towards the offense we saw in the regular season, to be honest. But it is something to consider because the schedule this year is going to be a lot harder. Patriots play the Seahawks, the Lions, the Packers, Bears, the Bills twice, obviously, the Steelers, the Jaguars, Broncos, Chargers, Chiefs. There aren't a lot of easy games in there. Now, that doesn't mean I expect the offense to completely fall off. I actually think they're better on paper this year. They added A.J. Brown, who's that top flight, outside the numbers, X receiver, who anytime you see him in a one-on-one, Drake May can look out there and just let it rip. You can also do a lot of things with him, and I'm sure Josh McDaniels is going to have a great idea of ways to use him. They got Romeo Doubs as well, have Hunter Henry at tight end. They've got a lot of good weapons. So I anticipate them just being a better offense this year. But it might be a tougher road based on the competition they're facing. Now, A.J. Brown, Romeo Doubs, it's nice to have better receivers. But to me, the biggest question, the biggest thing with this team is their offensive line. And it's the same way with most teams. You need to be able to protect the quarterback. You need to be able to run the football. You need to be able to be physical when you need to, athletic when you need to, good in pass pro. And with the Patriots, that was a big question at the end of last season because their first round, 4th overall pick, Will Campbell, he had a decent season before injuring his knee, and then when he came back, he was not very good in the playoffs. You saw it week in, week out. Not going to get into the technique. There was a lot of discussion about arm length and arm placement and hand placement and all that good stuff. To me, it was just he was a compromised player. He was playing on an injured knee that he did everything he could to get back from. And he just couldn't hold out against really stiff competition. So I don't think that's something where the Patriots need to panic, get him out of left tackle. Oh, he's just not made for the position. Nothing like that. That's still a possibility. Although I think Mike Vrabel has kind of put the kibosh on that, saying that Will Campbell's not going anywhere. But the Patriots, based on their moves this offseason, the decisions they made this offseason, it sounds like it might actually be a little bit of a possibility. With their first-round pick this season, they drafted a tackle, Caleb Lomu. Now, I know the idea is that he might be a swing tackle who can be a long-term solution at right tackle once Morgan Moses is gone. But just listen to the rest of these moves. The Patriots went out and signed Elijah Vera Tucker, who it's really unfortunate because he was a good player very early in his career, and it still is relatively early in his career, but he was a good player, and he can't avoid injury. He missed 10 games in 2022, 12 games in 23, and then all of last season. And yet the Patriots gave him a 3-year deal this offseason. They expect him to play left guard. That's kind of a risky move because you just don't know if you can count on the guy. So he's going to play left guard. Last year's left guard, Jared Wilson's going to move to center, and Will Campbell's going to stay at left tackle. But the question is, what happens if Elijah Vera Tucker gets hurt again? Who's going to take over his spot? Maybe they move Wilson back to left guard. Maybe they work in Lomu at left guard. Maybe they kick Will Campbell inside and put Lomu at left tackle. So while I don't think there's a need to panic about Will Campbell and make the decision right now on if he is the left tackle of the future or not, you could see scenarios where he's playing inside and maybe that's a better fit. But overall, the offensive line, the decisions that the Patriots make about the offensive line, they have to get it right. They have to get it right because Drake May, he does like to hold the ball. As much as his timing and rhythm as a passer have improved, he needs time in the pocket because he wants to hold it as long as possible so he can push the ball downfield. And if they don't get it right, you're going to see more games this season like you saw in the playoffs last year. Aside from that, I think the Patriots are a better team on paper overall, but they're not going to sneak up on anyone this year. And their schedule is much tougher, and that does make a difference. That can make a difference between being a 14-3 team and a 10-7 or 11-6 team. All right, let's move on to the Buffalo Bills. And the 2025 season was just so frustrating for this team, wasn't it? You finally had Patrick Mahomes out of the way. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens didn't make the playoffs. The Bills entered the postseason as the most experienced team in the AFC, and they still couldn't get it done. And at the end of the year, they decided, okay, this is the straw that broke the camel's back. We need to go in a different direction from Sean McDermott. Now, I'm sure there were some mixed reactions in Buffalo, probably a little bit of relief. A lot of people had been calling for his job for years, saying he could never get them over the hump. Many were saying, well, who else are you going to get? Who's going to be better than McDermott? Because McDermott, he does deserve props. He's been a very good head coach. He's a very good defensive mind. He turned a Bills franchise that hadn't made the playoffs in about 2 decades into a team that was a perennial Super Bowl contender. But sometimes this happens in sports. Some coaches get the team from being a complete dumpster fire to respectable, but eventually things get stale. You need someone to bring them to that next level, to get over the hump. And with Sean McDermott, who's a defensive-first head coach, at the end of the day, his team just had too many lapses in key situations in the playoffs and just didn't perform well enough in January. Just look at all their playoff losses. This past year against the Broncos, 33 points allowed. Last year in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, 32 points allowed against an offense that wasn't exactly rolling on all cylinders. The year before that, they allowed 27 points to the Chiefs at home. Again, similar situation. This was not the Chiefs' offense that was just dropping 40 points on every single team they faced. They were having their struggles that season. The year before that, the Bills allowed 27 points at home to the Bengals in the snow. The year before that, 42 points to the Chiefs in that overtime thriller. The year before that, AFC Championship game allowed 38 points to the Chiefs. And these were with Bills teams that have had very good defenses. There were a couple years in there where they were the number 1 or number 2 scoring defense in the NFL, and then they got to the playoffs and just didn't take care of business in the biggest of moments. And then you've got the situational lapses. You can go all the way back to 2019 to Josh Allen's first playoff game. Bills were playing at Houston, blew a 16-0 lead, ended up going overtime, and in overtime they had Houston on their heels. The Texans faced a 3rd and 18 in their own territory. This should have been a situation where they were forced to punt the ball one play later. Instead, they allowed Houston to convert. And they didn't just convert by making a miraculous play down the field. Deshaun Watson dumped the ball off to his running back, and he ran for the 18 yards. Just can't have that happen in that situation. A couple years later, we had 13 seconds, as you all know. Bills did a terrible job of managing the clock. Kicked the ball into the end zone for some reason instead of kicking it into play where the Chiefs would have had to field it and run some time off the clock. Then played a couple defenses on 2 plays to just give free releases and allow Patrick Mahomes to hit his back foot and get Tyreek Hill down the seam and then Travis Kelce down the seam. And the Chiefs kicked a relatively easy field goal for only having 13 seconds to drive about 40 yards. I mean, that game alone had a lot of people calling for McDermott's head. And then this past year, when you didn't have Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in the playoffs and they still couldn't get it done against Bo Nix and the Broncos, that was certainly devastating. But even in that game, there was a play where they had another situational lapse. Late in the fourth quarter, Bills led 27-23, about 2.5 minutes to go. The Broncos faced a 3rd and 11, and ultimately you had a safety, Cole Bishop, jump a route in the flat on a 3rd and 11 when he did not need to, and it was not his responsibility, and Bo Nix completed a pass right in the void, right behind him where he should have been sitting. Again, that's situational football, and we've seen enough of those plays. We've seen enough of those lapses in Buffalo late in seasons where it's not a coincidence. You can't just blame the players. At some point, you have to say, clearly this isn't something that's emphasized on this team. Because that's what's costed them. Josh Allen has been phenomenal in the playoffs, and he has morphed into not just a really talented NFL quarterback who can do things that no one else can do physically. He's a really advanced passer now. So it's time for the rest of the team to get up to Josh Allen's level. It's long past time because he can't do it all by himself. Now, I like the fact that the Bills went out and got DJ Moore, wide receiver, someone who can be an actual bona fide go-to receiver for Allen. Hasn't had that in a couple years. Hopefully, Dalton Kincaid can stay on the field for more than 27% of snaps like he did last year because he looks like he's starting to come on. He had a pretty good year when he did play last year. They've got a good running game, so hopefully under Joe Brady, they continue to lean on that. Although you never know, now that Brady is calling the shots, maybe he opens things up, or maybe he sticks with what's been working ever since he became the offensive coordinator of the Bills. But the biggest change you'll see is on the defensive side of the ball. The Bills brought in Jim Leonard to be the defensive coordinator, and I think what that means is you're going to see an aggressive team. You're going to see an aggressive defense. You're going to see a defense that's going to go out there and try to force the issue, try to make plays, create turnovers, get sacks. They're going to be far more aggressive when it comes to blitzing, use of disguise, sim pressures, all that good stuff. And it's not that Sean McDermott didn't use good disguise. I think Sean McDermott was actually one of the reasons he was a very good defensive mind was that he never gave, or he rarely gave quarterbacks a clean picture. So I liked a lot of what McDermott did, but clearly it was time for a change, and I'm on board with that move personally. But now hopefully that'll put them in position to, at the end of the year, if Josh Allen isn't having the absolute best game, if he doesn't have a Superman cape on, having an aggressive defense might help them win some games. Now they've got a lot of personnel turnover on defense this year. Of the 14 players on their defense who played 40% of the snaps or more last year, 8 are gone. So it's a considerable amount of turnover. But to me, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be a rebuild from a defensive standpoint. I think when you've got an aggressive defense, a defense that puts an offense on their heels physically and mentally, you can see quick turnarounds. You can see a huge impact. Now, just having an aggressive defense on its own is not enough. You have to be sound. You have to play that style correctly. But I think this is the type of change that they need. And Jim Leonard, very highly regarded, From what he did in college to his time with Vance Joseph on the Broncos defense the last couple of seasons, I think he's a perfect fit for what the Bills need to do. Moving on to the Miami Dolphins, who finished in third place last year, so we'll go in order here. The Dolphins also fired their head coach at the end of last season, but they're going in a completely different direction than the Bills are. They are going through a complete rebuild. And despite the fact that Mike McDaniel gave the Dolphins their best head coaching era since Dave Wanstead back in 2000 and 2004, the Dolphins are doing everything they can to move in the opposite direction of the team they just had. So Mike McDaniel, obviously a great offensive mind. The Dolphins were an offense-first team that never really were able to get their defense on track during his tenure. So what does Miami do? They go out and they hire Jeff Hafley, former defensive coordinator of the Packers. On top of that, the Dolphins were so eager to move in a different direction from their previous era that they decided to move on from Tua Tagovailoa. And they didn't just move on. They're on the hook for $54 million of guaranteed money, and they're going to take a $100 million cap hit over the next 2 years. And instead of having a player like Tua, who is not really physically gifted, he's more of a timing and rhythm passer, doesn't have a strong arm, doesn't have great scrambling ability, gets by on being precise within the design of the offense, is reliant on having time and receivers in the spots that they're supposed to be in. Instead of sticking with a quarterback like that, they went in the completely opposite direction and signed Malik Willis. Willis is supremely talented, can throw the hell out of the football. He's a very good scrambler, very good runner. He's going to help improve the Dolphins' run game, that's for sure. But there is not much precision, or not as much precision and timing and nuance to his game as Tua had. And Willis is really the big question with this team this year because I don't think anyone is expecting much from the Dolphins. So this is going to be one of those seasons where you're trying to figure out, okay, what does the future look like? Is Jeff Hafley the head coach of the future? Is Malik Willis the quarterback of the future? We've got this great 2027 quarterback class coming out next year. Is that going to be where the Dolphins are looking next spring? Because the decision by the Dolphins to go out and get Malik Willis, it seems a little bit like an experiment. Seems a little bit like hey, let's just roll the dice and see what's going to happen. Because he doesn't have a ton of experience. He is a huge risk. Has just 6 starts under his belt in 4 seasons. Has thrown just 155 passes. This is not a sure thing by any means. As dynamic as he can be, a lot of the success that Malik Willis had was with the Green Bay Packers in a very good system with Matt LaFleur, with great receivers around him, and in a situation where defenses didn't really know how to prepare for him. You could get away with doing certain things with Malik Willis in a short time period, in a short window, that you won't be able to in a 17-game season. And that's going to be the challenge this year. Not to mention, who's Malik Willis going to be throwing to? Right now, the Dolphins' top 3 receivers are Jalen Tolbert, Tutu Atwell, and Malik Washington. They also drafted a few receivers between picks 75 and 177, so maybe one or multiple of those receivers will work out, but it's not looking great at the moment, which means you're likely to see the Dolphins' offense operate significantly through the run game. And it sounds like that's what they want to do. They obviously have Devin Achane, who is very fast, very explosive, rushed for 1,350 yards last year, led the NFL with 5.7 yards per rush. You've got Malik Willis, so you know there's going to be some kind of read option element to this run game. And I think that's probably the way to go. The key to playing offense is putting the defense in conflict. And where do the Dolphins have the best chance to do that on a regular basis? In the backfield with that choice between Malik Willis or Devin Achane. Who's getting the ball? I know defenses have gotten a lot better at defending this, but there are still a lot of great ways to put the defense on their heels, confuse them at the mesh point. You can run read options off of power, duo. It's not just zone. So I think that's what they're going to try to do. They also used the 12th overall pick on Caden Proctor, who is a 6'6", 350-pound bruising left tackle that they're going to play inside at guard. So they're hoping to be physical up front with that. They're hoping to operate through their run game, I think. And based on who they have at receiver and who they have in their backfield, I think that makes the most sense. Now, you never know. Bobby Slowick is the offensive coordinator. He comes from that Shanahan tree. Loves to do a lot of under center offense. I know we've talked a lot about under center versus shotgun for a lot of these quarterbacks who have great abilities as runners. Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels on the previous episode. But whatever Slowick does, it has to feature the legs of Willis and Achane. Now, on the other side of the ball, Jeff Hafley comes in, and he obviously is going to run his defense. The question is, what exactly is that going to look like? He kind of was more of a man coverage guy at BC before he got to the Green Bay Packers. But then I think he got to Green Bay and he saw, hey, our cornerback room is really not that great. I don't know that I can just leave these guys in man coverage and let them win their one-on-ones on a regular basis. So he played a ton of zone, was predominant zone. About 80% both seasons in Green Bay, which was near the top of the league. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the same thing in Miami because they have a similar situation the Dolphins do. Their cornerback room is not great. And so Hafley's going to come to the conclusion that he can't just lead those guys in man coverage either. He's going to have to play a lot of zone. Going to have to win with a lot of scheme. That's one of the things that I was impressed by in Green Bay. Did a great job with disguises, sim pressures, stunts on the defensive line. He found ways to manufacture good defense instead of relying solely on his talent, which is something that I always look for in a defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator. And he helped make those Packers defenses really good. 2 years ago, Packers finished 6th in points allowed, 5th in yards allowed. For those of you Packers fans listening to this, you know that's not something that happened very often in the previous 2 decades. Last year, entering Week 15 before Micah Parsons got hurt, you had the same thing. Packers ranked 6th in points allowed and 5th in yards. Then the wheels fell off a little bit with Micah Parsons gone. That happens. That's understandable. But I do think we're going to see a little bit of what is Hafley made of here. He's going to have a challenging first year in Miami, given the personnel that he has. I don't anticipate that he'll make them a top-of-the-league defense, but I think he can make them respectable in year one. Either way, Dolphins fans, that's the best I got for you. If they can be dynamic with their run game, if Hafley can work some wizardry on defense, maybe you have a decent year, but this is very much a rebuild. And the Dolphins could be in for kind of a rough season. Speaking of rough seasons, no franchise is known better for rough seasons than the New York Jets. Very similar to the Dolphins, you're probably not in for a great season, probably not in for a playoff run. And a lot of what this year is going to be about is, what do we have for the future? Is Aaron Glenn the right guy for the future? Are we in position to have a good team around the quarterback position? Because we know as the Jets, we're going to get our quarterback of the future in the 2027 NFL Draft. And that's really what this season is about. On the offensive side of the ball, Geno Smith is the quarterback. We know this is a stopgap, but it is very important that the Jets have a good year offensively. It's important that the team around the quarterback position gets 17 games of quality reps running potentially the offense that they're going to be running with their quarterback of the future. Offensive line needs those reps. Receivers need those reps. Kenyon Sadiq, rookie tight end. Omar Cooper, rookie wide receiver. They need their well-run routes to be met with throws hitting them in the chest as soon as they turn around. They need their poorly run routes to be met with passes that are far out of their reach or not even being targeted at all. They need to have good habits instilled in them and reinforced, bad habits removed. And quite frankly, that's not just true for the rookies. Breece Hall needs that. Garrett Wilson needs that. They can't have another year like last year where they were playing with quarterbacks like Justin Fields, who don't play with timing, who can't give you anything consistently, who's not going to hit those routes when they're run well on time. That's why they brought in Geno Smith. He's a professional quarterback. As poor of a year as he had last year with the Raiders, he knows how to play the position. He has done it at a relatively high level in recent memory. Played pretty well with the Seahawks. Has been around. He's towards the end of his career. He'll give those guys some good reps. Frank Reich, that's why he was brought in. Because he knows how to run an offense. He's a professional play caller and a professional offensive coordinator. Aaron Glenn can just hand over the keys to him to run the offense and know that it won't be an absolute joke. And that's important because Aaron Glenn, his butt's on the line this year. And he's not taking any chances. So he doesn't seem like he's going to be that CEO coach who's going to just oversee both sides of the ball. He's going to be calling the defense. He's going to be implementing his defense. He has talked about how good of a play caller he is. I think he said that's his superpower. But the reality is that that's kind of true. He did a very good job in Detroit as a defensive play caller, was as responsible for them turning their franchise around as anyone else on that coaching staff. And there were a lot of games where he did win with scheme. He did win with play calling. Did win with disguise. Did win with things that were more scheme-centric than talent-centric. That's why he's a head coach right now. That's what got him the job. And so I think it makes sense this year with clearly him being on the hot seat, he's going to lean in and call the plays. Now, the difference this year is that he's actually going to have some good players to execute his defense. The Jets had a really good offseason. Almost too good if you were hoping for a tank this year and hoping that they would get the number one pick, but we'll address that in a second. They got better at all three levels of the defense. Traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick, who is a chess piece, a guy who can do a lot of things from the safety position. He'll help execute the defense, get everyone lined up, give Glenn the ability to be more opponent-specific from week to week. Jets signed Demario Davis at linebacker, who's still a really good linebacker, really smart linebacker. Again, knows how to play the position, is a professional. Again, I keep using that term professional when talking about the Jets, but that's exactly what they've needed. And then you've got their defensive line. The Jets used their second overall pick on edge rusher David Bailey, and every time he rushes the passer, he looks like he's just shot out of a cannon. He looks like he was born to rush the quarterback. Came out of his mother's womb doing rip and spin moves and getting after whoever was in the room there, I'm sure. And you pair him with Will McDonald, who also is a guy that uses speed to win off the edge, and this pass rush has a chance. McDonald has 18.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons. He's been one of the few bright spots for this Jets team over the last 2 years. And as we all know, everything starts with the pass rush. So if that's good, the Jets are going to be a lot better everywhere else on defense, including in that secondary where obviously they need help. They had as many interceptions last year as I did. 0, which is just staggering. And it's one of the reasons why Aaron Glenn is even on the hot seat, because the performance of the team on both sides of the ball really was embarrassing. So with the new talent they have, it would not be a surprise to see the Jets win 6, 8 games. I don't think that's unrealistic. But the reality is this season is not about this season. This season's about the future, 2027 and beyond. Will Aaron Glenn be here to steer this team into the future? Really does depend. I honestly, I don't know. I don't think if the Jets have a turnaround this year, but they only win 6 to 8 games, that makes him safe. I think he's still going to be in a gray area at the end of the season where Jets brass could feel justified going in any direction with him. It's going to completely be a feel thing. Going to completely be a, do we feel good about the direction of the team? And then, of course, you've got the 2027 Classic QBs. Look, there's no way to predict the future. The Jets are in the best position to trade up and get their guy. They've got 3 first-round draft picks. They've got theirs, the Cowboys, and the Colts. The issue is, are they going to be in a position to pick first or second, or are they going to be much lower and need to trade up only to get like the 3rd or 4th best quarterback? It might not be that big of a deal. They don't necessarily need to get the number 1 or number 2 quarterback in the draft. We know the number 1 guy in the draft is not always the one who pans out the best in the NFL. So they might be in decent shape just by getting the 3rd or 4th best quarterback, but it would be a shame if you're a Jets fan to see the Jets not get the 1st or 2nd quarterback in the draft. And that's the part that's just hard to predict right now. We just don't know. If the Jets win 6 to 8 games, their pick is not going to be in the top 5. If the Cowboys are as good as we think they're going to be, they're not picking anywhere near the top of the draft. The Colts are the wild card, but they're still a decent team. And the problem is, I think the teams you could probably project to be picking 1, 2, or 3 next year are teams like the Browns, Cardinals, even the Dolphins, like we just talked about. All 3 of those teams would be in need of a quarterback if they're picking up there next year. We know the Browns and the Cardinals definitely will be. If things don't work out for the Dolphins with Malik Willis and they've got a top 3 draft pick, you know that they're going to be picking a quarterback as well. So the best case scenario for the Jets is the Cowboys or Colts have a calamitous season, or you get a team that already has a quarterback of the future but still isn't very good, maybe like the Raiders, and they end up picking at the top of the draft again, and they're obviously willing to trade out because they already have Fernando Mendoza, for instance. That could be a situation where if anyone is trading out, the Jets are in best position to trade up and get that pick with the 3 first-round draft picks that they have. Or maybe they just sit tight and they're fine getting the 3rd or 4th best quarterback. Again, a lot of unknown. As good as this class is supposed to be in 2027, we don't know how good it will be until the end of this college football season. We don't know how deep it will be. There are always a few surprises every single year. So if you're the Jets, you just have to wait until next offseason. And in the meantime, get this organization looking as good and as crisp and as professional as you can around the quarterback position so that whoever you do pick is actually stepping into a good situation. That's it for today's show. Thank you all for listening. If you like this episode, please be sure to subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also go directly to Substack. Be sure to check out footballfilmroom.com. We are going team by team just about every single day, doing written breakdowns, more stats and analysis than you can possibly put into a podcast, so I encourage you to go check it out. We'll be back next week to preview the NFC North, arguably the best division in football. But I think that's everything I've got for you today, and I'll talk to you next time.